Welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Sean Kalin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Michelle Pennix, Lighthouse Christian Church. Rabbi Matt Durenbacher, the Temple. Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church. And Richard Euler, retired U.S. Army chaplain. We begin this week with the prosecution resting in the trial of Brooks Houck and Joseph Wasson.
Tina Nicely and Dee Dee Daniel made signs and wore pink Tuesday, both a show of support for the Ballard family.
I've been praying for Sherry and for Tommy at the time, and just for their whole family.
Today isn't their first time in Bowling Green, but it is the first time in the courtroom.
It's very surreal. It's very interesting. It's interesting to see everyone that we've been following.
On the witness stand today, a cell phone analyst testified that Crystal Rogers' phone was in active use from about 7:30 p.m. until 9:30 on the night of July 3rd, the night she disappeared. He said she was playing games and on Facebook. At 9:23, the battery dies, and at 11:57, the phone turns back on. Within seconds, it's manually shut off. It doesn't turn on again for days. This directly contradicts Brooks Houck's story to police that Crystal was playing games on her phone when he went to bed at midnight.
I'm praying that the jurors see those two just like we do, guilty. You know, there's no body, but there's so much things that line up.
We also heard from a man named Lon Spalding. He lives on Thompson Hill Road, next to the site of one of the most recent FBI searches. Spalding told the jurors the men who live here were running an illegal dump, bringing trashed furniture to the property and then burying it or burning it. But he said July 3rd, 2015 was very odd. He testified that night they were digging late into the night and early morning hours, digging on the other side of the road and using a type of bulldozer to make a large hole. He was witness number 33 for the Commonwealth and one of the final as the prosecution rested its case just after lunch.
Once this is done, I hope there's a few more indictments, and I would love to see justice for Jason Ellis and for Tommy.
So panel, it's taken 10 years to get to this point, exactly 10 years to the date we're recording this, July 3rd, from that testimony there. Your thoughts on where the trial is and with really the impact on the community and the families involved?
Yeah, well, we started before we came live on air just talking about the fact that, you know, we feel so much compassion for the family, and we remember the events of that time because there was so much happening in the Bardstown community and just what they've been through. But I'm, I guess, more assured in my faith than ever that, you know, God is close to the brokenhearted and He knows exactly what they've been through. I'm reminded of scripture that asks us to recall, Lord, you know, how long before justice is done? How long do we have to wait? And I think about, you know, Sherry Ballard in this case in particular, but what a beacon of hope she is, I think, for not only her community, but for the larger state and those that are keeping up with this trial, that stay committed, you know, stay committed, follow through, don't lose hope. You know, be resolved in your determination to get justice for your child. And if there's anyone who deserves that, you know, I've thought about this case often. I think about it like Breonna Taylor's case, honestly. Those two mothers and what they've been through, they both deserve justice.
You know, the scripture that you were talking about, I was thinking before we came on as well, that the Psalms talk a lot about how God is a God who loves justice, right? He just loves justice, that He hates evil. And I think one of the challenges for us in our communities, in our places of worship, and really in our world is that, like this case, we don't see justice happening very quickly. And that can be exhausting for folks. And so I think one of the things that we get to do as a community of faith when it affects our communities is that we do get to come together and we get to support one another, and we try to be that presence of God to those people who are really struggling when it's like, okay, Lord, are you working? Am I seeing something here? And I was thinking about there's a song by Leland, this this duo called Waymaker. And the words of this song, the chorus of this song says, even though we don't see it, you're working. Even though we don't feel it, you're working. And that's got to be our hope, right? That we have to believe that God is working for justice, even in the background and in the unseen places that we don't get to see, because he is that God who loves justice.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite lines in the Reformed Jewish prayer book, it says, pray as if everything depends on God, and live as if it all depends on us. And so it's beautiful, everything that both of you said, right? Like God is there comforting the family and the community, and the community has just been through so much. I have family members that live in Bardstown, and at the end of their road there are still signs. And the fact that it's taken so long shows that there is a lot of intentionality going into the process. And so on that side, it's a really good thing that it's taken so long, but it's also really difficult that it's been dragging out this long, because the family, the community, everyone involved are so invested and need that sense of closure to be able to move forward.
Actions, I think of that this was an historical event, and I think of actions of violence like that just bringing fear, and about the need to, you won't like fully resolve it, but hopefully it brings some comfort, some consolation to the family of Crystal Rogers' family, and to the victims and other, as we see the other victims of violence there too, that there's this need for justice. I also happen to like what was said about God being very near to the brokenhearted and God's own desire for justice. And so as a people of faith then, we're believing in the midst of all of this that God is also doing work and always bringing about the good and bringing about justice, bringing about what's good, so that for our own good.
My heart too has gone out to this, and I live a lot closer to Bardstown than I do even here. So, we heard a lot down there about what was happening, and your heart goes out to the family, what they go through, certainly, and then having to relive it through investigations, through publicity, through now trials. How much more can they take? But and you said it correctly that they have the stamina to be able to withstand any of these issues. So, but then the defense comes along, and then they try to, manufacture things, maybe manufacture reasonable doubt, and those kinds of things. And we say, well, where is the justice?
And I think as a faith community, leaders and folks, is that we get to rest in the fact that God is the ultimate judge, right? That regardless of what happens this side of eternity, is that whether we see it or not, is that because we have this God who is just, is that justice will eventually come to fruition. And again, the challenge for us is that we don't get to see it sometimes, right? Or it's so delayed that we miss it, or that it just kind of it happens, but it's not really seen. But again, I have to say, but I have this God who is just, and I have to trust in the fact that he is working all things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And so somehow, some way, God is working in this, and we just have to wait and see, I think.
I think, too, as a person of faith, one of the things that I always look at is when tragedy has come into my own life, asking God the question, what is it that you want me to learn through this experience? And seeing Crystal Rogers' mom today, as opposed to what it looked like 10 years ago, again, I hope brings some encouragement to other people who are so close to tragedy in their own lives, that it may not, you'll never forget it. It doesn't go away, but you do grow and you do learn, and you do, if you want, get closer to God as time progresses. And again, I just want to say that about her mom in this circumstance, you know, the strength that she's shown day after day of this trial, and the community, and how they've come together to say, you know, we're going to go through this. There's been difficult times, but I bet in talking to her, she's learned a lot of lessons over these past 10 years. She's learned more about herself, more about the people that God has placed in her life, and most certainly about the God that she serves as well.
That's good.
Very good. And the closing arguments are set to happen on Monday, and the jury should get the trial on Tuesday. And we'll see what happens from there. We'll be following it because the mom, she lost her husband as well, who was murdered. So I'm sure that this may evolve into something with that. So we'll certainly probably be discussing it again on moral side. Thank you for a great discussion. I love that. We turn now to national news this week with the deadly ambush in Idaho. Firefighters lured into a deadly trap.
Tonight, the suspect accused of luring firefighters into a deadly ambush in Idaho reportedly dreamed of one day becoming a firefighter himself, according to one member of his family.
There is information that we've received that he at one time wanted to be a firefighter.
Late today, authorities identifying the suspect as 20-year-old Wes Rowley, releasing this image saying he deliberately started this wildfire in Canfield Mountain and Coeur d'Alene Sunday and then opened fire on first responders. 2 firefighters killed, a third badly wounded. Authorities say the suspect actually interacted with the firefighters before the shooting. They'd asked him to move his vehicle.
It had something to do with his vehicle being parked where it was. So, yeah.
Tonight, the suspect's grandfather, Dale, speaking to multiple news organizations, including ABC News, saying he's heartbroken.
Nobody wants to think that their son or grandson is going to go do this. I feel more sad for the people that got killed than I do for him, simply because they didn't deserve it.
The horror unfolding around 1:21 p.m. Sunday afternoon, firefighters responding to a routine call-out for a brush fire near a popular trailhead. Crews racing right into a trap. By 2 p.m., 40 minutes later, gunfire and these panic calls began.
Right now, there's an active shooter zone. They're shot.
First responders realizing they are under attack.
We need law enforcement immediately. We've got 2 unresponsive battalion chiefs.
Frantic and taking cover.
I'm pinned down behind Battalion 1's rig. It's clear to me that this fire was set intentionally to draw us in.
Police exchanging gunfire with the suspect, later using cell phone data to pinpoint his location in a wooded area. And there, 6 hours later, authorities removing the suspect's body just as the wildfire closed in. And overnight, that solemn salute honoring those fallen firefighters, a procession of police and fire trucks carrying their bodies to the medical examiner.
So, panel, unthinkable horror, and the firefighter community is such a part of the Crusade family, and so your thoughts on it and just where we are with the story.
There's just no clear example of the heinous nature that evil exists in our world, right? That we see this where we have first responders who are the frontline folks who are going to help those who are in need of help. And I know in our church over the years, we've had lots of first responders in our church. And I know the fear that they talk about, that they have to go into places where they don't know what they're really going to encounter, but how much we still appreciate the calling that I think that God has placed on their lives to be the ones who can go to those front lines, that can go to those places. And so I think it just calls us and beckons us to pray for them and to ask God to shield them when they do that which they've been equipped to do. And who would ever expect that they're going out to fight a fire and encounter an evil like this? Again, I think it's just the reality that we live in a world where evil actually does exist.
Mm. And I think, too, you know, very often we're triggered in these situations because as members of the faith community, we're often called not only to pray for the falling, but also very often the perpetrators. You know, I think that's something that we don't talk enough about, that, you know, we're all created in God's image. And because of sin, because of, you know, this being a fallen world and so much evil, horrible things happen and are committed by people who were created in the image of God. And so I think it's one of those things that we very often have to, step back and look at and examine, how did we get here? What were the circumstances? I think they said he was maybe 20 years old, and I immediately go to, as a former educator, I want to know, what school did he go to, and who was his friends, and what kind of life did he have that would, grow and foster this kind of evil. And at the same time, we're 100% prayerful and supportive of the firefighters. And so I think as members of the community, we have to really balance that a lot of times. We have to do our due diligence and being patient, waiting for justice, but also recognizing that ultimately we were all created in the image of God. There are questions that have to be answered. And so that this doesn't keep happening, we have to ask those questions and really try to get them answered.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought that up. For me, this whole tragedy is such a powerful reminder of how important mental health resources are, right? And so mental health resources and community. We're reminded in lots of stories throughout the entire Bible, right? The importance of community and how people's lives can be changed through positive interactions in community. So if mental health resources are more readily available, there's more funding and there's more access and more opportunity for those, and we can develop emotional health through community building, then ideally we can avoid future tragedies like this, because you're absolutely right, it is unspeakable, and each person involved, the firefighters and the perpetrator and all those left behind in the aftermath, are all images of God, right? And so how do we pick up all of those pieces and sort of speak truth and love and justice at this moment?
And I think, if I can just add to that, I was thinking about, I brought up his age because right here in Louisville, this weekend, we had a 12 and 13-year-old girl arrested for shooting. And I think the same thing, what's the story? What's happened? How have we gotten to this point? But most importantly, how do we stop this from happening?
Right.
How do we intervene?
Right. I just sit back and just think of the surprise and the shock when we see violent acts all the time. But this story seems different. For one thing, of as firefighters are heroic, and that also that I think of their job as, we know at times it can be dangerous, and that they have training. I think of the kind of danger they go through, though. They have training for that to help mitigate that. And the kinds of dangers are the structures on fire or things like that. But you don't think about human violence against the firefighter. And that's where it sort of touches my heart there and hurts. So to come to some sense of healing for all of that community, and for us to pray for our firefighters and to pray that something like this does not happen again.
Yeah, you go into a war zone, it seems like every time they go out, there's a dangerous situation. And now do they have to be armed on top of it all? It just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, think about all the preparation that they have to go through, right? Picking up on what you said, you're a firefighter. You have to learn how fire moves, and you have to learn structures, and where's the best place to put the water, and what do you need to do, especially in like forest fires? What do you have to cut away? What do you have to start fires in places to stop the fire? Like, do they even get trained? And what happens if you have an active shooter while you're trying to put out a fire, right? Like, it's just the unknowns that had they even thought that was a possibility, or were they just, we're just going in there because we got to take care of that fire. So many unknowns.
Yes, and think of the stress around that too. It puts on my mind of wanting to fight fire, all those things like you said that they have to learn how to do, and their focus and attention is on that. Then this other action happens. Other kinds of first responders deal with that kind of violence. I know much more frequently, but that to me is something new, and I think of the stress of that around that situation.
And Idaho experiencing this on the heels of now the trial that they've just completed of, that murders
College
that took place, the college students, and now something like this. It's it seems like the Wild West became peaceful and now is becoming wild again.
Thanks for another great discussion. Thanks for watching and listening to Moral Side of the News this week on WHS Radio and WHS Television. Let's move on to a story now we've been trying to get to since Easter and Passover. It's been on their list every week, and it's a great story, so I'm sure they're going to want to talk about it. So a recent Pew Research Center report finds that after many years of a steady decline, the share of Americans who identify as Christians has leveled off and actually increased a bit, and the Jewish faith has also increased a bit. So let's take a look at that story.
One of the big findings that comes out of the religious landscape study is that over the long term, the U.S. public has become less religious. We see this when we look at religious identity, when we look at religious practices like frequency of prayer, when we look at religious beliefs. We see them in pretty much every social and demographic category we're able to look at.
Christians have made up a large share of American society. And if they're shrinking, that means that at least one other group has to be growing. And we see that amongst those who are religiously unaffiliated. These are people who tell us, we ask them, what is your current religion? If any, they tell us that they're atheist, agnostic, or say their religion is nothing in particular. And we often call this group the nones, N-O-N-E-S, nones.
Over the last 4 or 5 years or so, when we compare the new landscape study with other recent surveys we've done, what we see is a lot of stability in American religion. We see a lot more stability than decline.
So it appears the downward trend is in full reverse, with the engine driving that change occurring among Generation Z and millennials. So what do you make of this, and do you see this in your own congregations?
Well, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but this topic super excites me because I believe that our faith really is the answer to the heinous, evil things that we've been talking about earlier today, right? That we believe that our faith has an answer to that, and to see that there have been revivals on the campuses of places like Asbury University, Purdue University, West Virginia, University of Arkansas, like all these places. I read this great quote that said, from the locker room to the classroom, colleges and universities are just primed for revival. I'm super excited about what we're seeing happening on the landscape today.
The 60s didn't do organized religion any good. They had the neo God is dead theory, and things just kind of went south fast. They tried to do some revivals. We even tried to do some when I was up at school in Canada, and through the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. But it is comforting to see that there is some inroads with some of the younger people who are, seeing that there is importance of finding something greater than the self.
I think about, my dad, who's 80. He's like most people in his generation, and he'll say to me, whenever I laugh and how slow he's moving or something's changing, he'll say, well, you just keep on living. You just keep on living. It'll catch up with you too. And I kind of think that's what, religion does for us. You keep on living. You'll get to the point where you realize you need someone, a greater power in your life than what you have. You realize that it can't be found in things and even in other people, but you've got to, as they say, meet Esau for yourself. You got to come to that point where you say, what is this about? What am I really doing this for? What is my purpose? And I think everything that the millennials and Generation Z have experienced in their lifetime, everything that we've talked about, and especially their a propensity to see it and be right in their hand through their phones 24/7 surely causes them to say, I got to find the true meaning of life. I've got to find out what this is all about. We can't just be here for this day-to-day grind and nothing means anything. So it is the most exciting story. It is the most exciting news because there really is no other hope.
as someone who falls in the millennial category. I mean, a lot of people I've noticed in my age group, a little bit younger and older too. I think it's spanning a couple of generations. People are looking for new ways to make meaning out of everything that is happening in the world, right? There's a lot of noise out there. People are on their smartphones all the time. There's drama and tragedy and everything happening in the world, and we have access to that all the time. It doesn't shut off, right? We're not sitting there and reading a newspaper and then we can just set it down, right? Our phones are always there, so we're always being inundated with this. And so it's not surprising to me, and it's really exciting actually that people are engaged with their faith traditions, right? I've seen in the Jewish community there has been sort of an uptick and a new excitement with being involved in Jewish life. Community is a powerful thing, faith is a powerful thing, and it's exciting too. I mean, since Judaism is not a proselytizing religion, it's also fun to look out and see other people connecting with their faith traditions in new and meaningful ways too.
I wonder about what the searches are, and I just some guesses or things that, one, I'm wondering if people are searching for that mysterious other, who is, of course, God, that they're looking and saying, this life is beyond just what I see in front of me, but there is a grace and also a call for faith, a call for something that is unseen and yet feels real. That I think that's one search. Another search, I think, is also so many questions about our future that as we become so tech dependent, that then we have questions about how fast are we moving here? What is our future going to be? And does that future require moral and ethical behavior, and where am I going to find information about that and to look for sources there? I also think that people may find post-COVID a real strong sense of need for community, larger than just smaller community, but to develop community in places and people we can trust, and to find some place there to say part of it, to say that's a part of my identity, but it's also something I really want and need. I think all those, and there's probably more that's part of that authentic search that faith seems to find some answer to, and some place in that they can find that is good to live in. And we all want that, I think, you know, and so it's a part of it, and it is as ministers and pastors very good and exciting news to find people who want that.
And wanting it face to face.
Yes,
instead of here.
Yes,
face to face,
Very good. We'll leave it there. We're running out of time. Thanks so much to our panel today, Reverend Michelle Pennix, Rabbi Matt Durenbacher, Father John Stoltz, Reverend Dr. George Wasson, and Richard Euler. Thanks. Happy 4th of July weekend. Thanks for a great show today. It was really good. I really enjoyed listening to all your comments. Have a great week. See you next time on Moral Side of the News.